The question is that this House do now adjourn. Mr Charles Walker.
Madam Deputy Speaker, it's a great honour to move the adjournment this evening. After all, we've had the budget today, so the eyes of the nation are upon this place. Madam Deputy Speaker, 2 years ago I was involved in a fantastic community campaign to bring an urgent care centre to Cheshunt. I was joined by over 3,000 of my constituents in a letter-writing campaign to the PCT. We had a number of public meetings with the car parks overflowing, where many hundreds of my constituents attended to make their views known. The campaign culminated with myself, along with the Chief Executive of the Council and the Leader of the Council, visiting the then Secretary of State for Health, Alan Johnson, at the Department of Health. It was a true community campaign. If the big society means anything, Madam Deputy Speaker, that was the very basis of the big society. People coming together from across a community, joining as one voice to bring a much-needed facility to my constituency. Madam Deputy Speaker, and since it arrived in October 2009, it has been fabulously well received. They estimated that at most 400 people a week would use it, but on some weeks we have had 700 people voting with their feet and coming to this GP-led urgent care centre. It really is at the heart of the community. And the reason so many people are choosing to use that facility is because it's open 12 hours a day, 7 days a week. It's open from 8 in the morning to 8 at night. Unlike many GP surgeries, it doesn't close for lunch. It's also, as I said, open on Saturday and Sunday, at a time when people can use a medical facility because they're not at work in London. Yet, despite this enormous success, I was horrified to learn a few months ago that the PCT was not happy with its performance. Because, Madam Deputy Speaker, I don't need to tell you that being a Member of Parliament over the last 3 years has been fairly challenging. But one of the bright spots of my career has been walking around my constituency, being stopped by people saying, "Charles, we're so pleased we've got the urgent care centre. It was so much needed in this part of the borough. Thank you so much for the campaign you led." And that has been enormously gratifying to get that level of feedback, and enormously satisfying. So the PCT came to meet with Hertfordshire Members of Parliament in the House of Commons, and I had my turn to chat through the issues relevant to Broxbourne with them. After 10 minutes of pleasantries, I raised the question. It was almost off the cuff, but of course you're not thinking of closing the urgent care centre, are you? And they said, "Well, I'm afraid, Charles, yes, that's one of the options on the table." Now, Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm normally a mild-mannered Member of Parliament, but on that occasion, I'm afraid, I blew up. Indeed, I think I swore. In fact, I know I swore. I am ashamed of my behaviour, but it demonstrates how passionate I feel, how passionately I feel about the urgent care centre in my constituency.
I'm going to my friend, and I can certainly vouch personally for his passion and commitment to the urgent care centre, and also for the joint campaign in Cheshunt, in Hertfordshire and in Enfield, for the retention of a fully functioning A&E at Cheshunt Hospital. And doesn't what has happened in the urgent care centre highlight the importance of the Secretary of State's decision to encourage us all to think again and look at other options than the BE8 strategy, which not only would lead to the downgrade of Enfield's Chase Farm, but also is predicated on an urgent care centre at Chase Farm?
My honourable friend makes an excellent point, and he is at the very forefront, along with the honourable member for Enfield North, to save the Chase Farm A&E, and I am always proud to join him outside those gates, making the argument for a full functioning A&E service at Chase Farm. Now, the PCT, Madam Deputy Speaker, have told me that they believe the urgent care centre, the GP-led urgent care centre, is treating inappropriate cases, whatever an inappropriate case is. That actually people going to the urgent care centre should be going to their GPs. And why should the PCT, they say, Charles, why should we pay for this treatment twice? Well, of course they shouldn't pay for it twice. But I always believed the money should follow the patient. The money shouldn't follow the GP not delivering the service. And the reason my constituents are using the urgent care centre so fully is because actually many GP practices, not all, but many GP practices in my constituency are not delivering on their promise, are not living up to their end of the deal of providing a full GP service to my constituents. So my constituents, as I said a few moments ago, are voting with their feet. GP surgeries close down at lunch. They close early in the evening. They don't open at weekends. If you want an appointment, you have to call up on the morning you want an appointment to be told we haven't got any today, but if you want to come and see us tomorrow, try calling us tomorrow. This isn't acceptable. And my constituents aren't going to sit at home and wait to be treated like this day after day. What they're going to do is they're going to walk to the urgent care centre and get treated there. And what really upsets me is that the beacon of success in our constituency, the one that is seeing up to 700 people a week, now faces closure. And it's not the GPs who are facing necessary censure for some of their practices in the way they deliver services to my constituents. Now, I discovered in this PCT board paper that many of the GP practices in my constituency are in the NHS version of special measures. That means that they're in the bottom 10% of GP practices in the country. And again, this leads me to ask, why is it the urgent care centre that is delivering a high level of service that faces closure, whereas the GPs, as I've said earlier, are not delivering the service that they are being paid to deliver? Now, Madam Deputy Speaker, the PCT is saying that there was a unanimous decision on behalf of a steering committee to change the use of the urgent care centre, at best to make it a minor intra-unit or perhaps even close it. They said this decision came as a result of a meeting with various stakeholders and some research, independent research, I was told, put forward by an organisation called Opinion Research Services. Well, of course, this wasn't independent research because it was commissioned by the PCT. They paid the bills of Opinion Research Services. Now, I don't know what went on at that meeting, but I'm fairly sure what didn't go on, and that was that we didn't get a full picture, those there didn't get a full picture of actually how successful the urgent care centre is at meeting the needs of local constituents. But what I did learn was actually the GP services around that area leave a lot to be desired. On page 8 of this board report, it says a quarterly patient access survey carried out nationally has highlighted perceived problems with access and satisfaction with primary care in the area served by Cheshunt UCC. Page 8 goes on to say, in addition, perceived poor access to primary care in and around the area served by Cheshunt must be addressed. Notice this emphasis on perceived. This isn't perceived poor access, this is real poor access, because if it was perceived poor access, hundreds of my constituents wouldn't be going to the urgent care centre. It goes on page 11 to 12 to say the need to improve access to primary care in the Cheshunt area has been recognised, and steps are being taken in conjunction with the Clinical Executive Committee to support and performance manage those practices, not a practice, those practices in the bottom 10% nationally in terms of patients' perceived access. Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, this quite frankly isn't good enough. And I am even more concerned by this when I then go on to read that it is actually local GP commissioners who are placing pressure on the PCT to close our successful GP-led urgent care centre. Page 9 of this board report goes on to say local GP commissioners do not support the configuration and have confirmed that they would not wish to commission the UCC as currently configured at Cheshunt in the future. On page 12, the view of the GP practice-based commissioning leads in the locality is that these needs are best addressed directly with the practices rather than by way of additional services. But why aren't they addressing these needs now, Madam Deputy Speaker? The PCT has, with great fanfare, said that they're providing additional services and support to GPs to help them improve. Now that, of course, is very welcome. But they're providing new telephone systems, automated self-check-in screens, waiting room plasma screens, web-based online appointment systems, electronic document management systems. My constituents and I want to know what on earth has been going on for the past 10 years in these practices. Now, one thing that the NHS hasn't been short of is money. One thing GPs haven't been short of is money. So what have they been doing it? So these absolutely critical tools for managing patient load have not been placed in their surgeries, and now the PCT is having to fund them. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, in conclusion, I would just say this. If services in my constituency are to improve, we need competition. We need the urgent care centre setting new standards of treatment. What incentive will there be for GPs to improve their service levels if the UCC, the urgent care centre, is shut? Because the urgent care centre is driving ever higher levels of patient care. And I believe it is incumbent on my GPs who are falling behind either to deliver that level of care or surpass that level of care, or perhaps make way and allow practices to come into the borough who are willing to take up the challenge of opening 12 hours a day, of providing weekend services. But until we reach that stage, there is absolutely no excuse on behalf of the PCT to close this urgent care centre down. Now, I am aware they had a meeting earlier today, the PCT had a meeting earlier today, where they've decided to downgrade the urgent care centre to a minor injury unit. And they think they'll get away with that. But I don't think that that is good enough. I don't think that will satisfy my constituents. Because, as I've said, closing down the urgent care centre, removing the GPs from that urgent care centre, removes the real incentive for GP practices in and around that centre who are not delivering to their patients to actually improve their services. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, as you can see, I'm really very, very annoyed about this. I thought I'd come here and I'd manage to smile my way through it and be magnanimous, but I simply can't be. My whole life, I've believed that good practice and success should be rewarded. I just thought that was the way things were. That an organisation that saw an urgent care centre that was delivering not 400 patient outcomes a week as envisaged, but was delivering 600 or 700, was a success story, a success that deserved to be built on. By accident or design, our PCT has stumbled onto a formula that works and meets the needs of the local community. But instead of building on that, they're pulling the rug from underneath it. And I believe they're being pressured by some GP practices in my constituency and future GP commissioners to do that. So I will conclude, Madam Deputy Speaker, after my 15 minutes by saying this. There is only one vested interest I represent in this place. And it's not the PCT's interests, it's not GP's interests, it's the vested interests of my constituents. More than 520 turned up at a public meeting I held last Thursday to say no to the PCT. We want to keep our urgent care centre. 520 people on about 9 days' notice. The PCT's got it wrong. It needs to listen, and we need that urgent care centre in Cheshunt. Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker.